Nomad Podcast.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Nomad Podcast, and today I have the wonderful Robin Seyr joining me. And if you don't know Robin is a fellow Austrian, I would say, a fellow Austrian Bitcoin podcaster, and he does some amazing work by educating people about Bitcoin and future risks and what might happen in the future. And he had some amazing guests like Michael Saylor on his podcast, Jeff Booth including, and Nachi Brunel even. So make sure to check out his podcast, and also make sure to check out the episode he recorded with me, which was an amazing talk, I think about 1 hour. So I don't want to spoil too much, so I will just link that down below in the description. But also please make sure to check out his YouTube channel, his podcast, and wish him a very happy birthday, because today is his birthday. And Robin, have a very nice happy birthday, and let's get right into the episode. So with that, welcome back to another episode of Nomad Podcast. And today I got, the camera's up here, not down there. Today I got Robin Seyr joining me. And Robin, I normally start the podcast with people sharing their story, how they got into Bitcoin, how they discovered it, what's their story basically. And yeah, what's your rabbit hole, mate?
Yeah, really quickly, I was always extremely savings person. Like I always was like, if I got money, I can remember the story. I told that I think on another podcast, but it's a really interesting story because it shows how my mind ticked and why I got into Bitcoin so early on. When my mom gave me some money for lunch, like I was like, I don't know, 12 years old or something like that. I always looked like, oh, if I have €5, €1 is for me, so I can buy something else later. So I really have like a piggy bank. Like this mindset was always in me, saving. And then when I turned 18 years old, I got a little bit more money from my grandma because she's like, oh, I want to give you money now because otherwise it might be taxed later. So that was my grandma. And so I got 18 years old, my first kind of money. I also started work at that time. So it was like the start of me getting into this whole money theme with the mindset of Robin is a really good saver. So what did I do? I went to my bank and asked, what can I do with my money? And they're like, oh yeah, we have a really nice modern new savings account and it's separate and it's on the phone and it's really cool. And you get like 0.01 interest rates for that, which was absolutely not fascinating. But in that moment, I was like, oh yeah, let's do it. And I did that for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I was like calculating how much I get from that. And I was like, oh yeah, this does not make sense. I can also keep it in a normal account. The interest rate is so low that I don't get anything for that. So I basically was like, I want to do something different. Then I went to the ETFs. I was in ETFs like a year or something like that. I was not good and not good. I mean, the market was not that booming. ETFs, you cannot really be good or bad. You just pick the ones that everyone picks and hope the market goes up faster than inflation. Usually not. And so then 1 year it was like almost the same. There was some fees associated which ate my profits because I did not have a lot of money. And then I was like, oh, but I like it. Like I like the ETF things. Then I had a Flatex account and I was like, I want to do something more fun. I was like, I heard people make money with stocks. And then at the time, I actually sat at a McDonald's. So because I sat at a McDonald's, I bought McDonald's stocks. Like how else should you do it? You have no clue about stocks anyway. So why not go for McDonald's? So I bought McDonald's, and the great thing is about, I think it was like $200 of stocks. I don't know what the price back then was. The great thing that happened then is first it went up. So I actually made money from that with not knowing anything. And the second thing that I was like, I had a foot in the door. I had skin in the game all of a sudden. And I felt the need to research about it. So then I really researched about how to value stocks, how to pick stocks, because I had that fear that I picked the wrong stock because I did not do any research, obviously. And then the further I got, the more I got to know about stocks in general. I went deep into Apple. I went deep into Facebook. I went deep into Tesla. Then I went really balls deep into Tesla. I sold everything and put it all in Tesla, which was an amazing decision because I don't know, I mean, like 1,000% gain or something like that, even more than that. I got really good, almost the perfect timing in Tesla. I didn't knew so much about stocks. Like I had a lot of success in stocks and never really lost money, just with Carnival, Carnival. I think Carnival Cruise, something like that. It was called. It was when in 2020 when I was like, let's do some conservative dividend investing. Yeah, this was not the best decision. I lost like, I think 3,000 euros on that. It was very, very, very dissatisfying. But it is what it is. And then I actually wanted to go into real estate. Like made some profits with Tesla, made some losses with Carnival Cruise. Let's do real estate. And I think that's the common fiat maxi way of doing stocks, ETFs, then real estate using the fiat game. And actually, this is then at that time in 2020, I discovered Anthony Pompliano and Michael Saylor interview. Like that's literally probably, I think that's the first proper Bitcoin video that I actually consumed. Anthony Pompliano interviewing Michael Saylor, a really historic interview, I think, because it's the first public interview of Michael Saylor where he talked about buying Bitcoin with MicroStrategy. And this was also my kind of first entry in Bitcoin. From there, like the story was more like I wanted to prove a friend wrong in Bitcoin, and that's why I watched the video. Then I watched more videos, and on Friday I went into the weekend and I was like, I want to prove my friend wrong, why he wants to go into Bitcoin. I was a Bitcoin skeptic from 2017 to 2020 and said like, only productive assets are good. This whole Warren Buffett mindset. And in that weekend, I actually got to know like, Bitcoin could be something. Opened a Coinbase account, big mistake. Got a ledger, big mistake. But I got self-custody literally on the second day that I got Bitcoin. I'm really proud of that I got self-custody so early on. But yeah, the wrong one. But back then it was the obvious choice for me. And this is basically my story, how I got in. It was like, I was a savings person. Then I went into the fiat maxi kind of a route. And then I went into Bitcoin a little bit. And then it took me 1 year to sell everything and go balls deep in Bitcoin. So my friends were like, first he went balls deep into Tesla, then balls deep into Bitcoin. But Bitcoin was different because Tesla just went balls deep into because it felt right. But with Bitcoin, I actually researched way more than that. Like Tesla, it was a luck thing. Like honestly, that I didn't deserve that money that I made there, to be completely frank. But then in Bitcoin, I actually did a lot of research, and I went from 2020 to 2021 completely all in. And since 2021, I am all in Bitcoin, and I'm living kind of on a Bitcoin standard. Of course, I pay my bills in fiat. I get paid for my podcast mostly in fiat, but more and more in Bitcoin. That money that I need myself for bills, I take in fiat, and the money that I don't need myself, I directly let them pay in my Bitcoin wallet. So I save the fees from the Bitcoin exchange. Sorry, 21 Bitcoin.
Oh fuck, you just roasted them on so many levels there. Uh, okay, that's really cool. Is it then more of a, so your story basically really started with actually anti-Bitcoin and now pro-Bitcoin, basically, in a
Yeah,
sense.
I told 3 years long my friends that Bitcoin is a scam and that Bitcoin has no real use case and all the things that I never said the environment thing, that because that
Yeah,
came
yeah,
later.
that's
Uh,
bullshit.
and I didn't knew more about Bitcoin. Like I literally was like, yeah, Bitcoin is like gold and I don't like gold, and Bitcoin is digital, so why should it even have a little bit value? And I was like, yeah, gold at least has some value. so I was really a complete I didn't knew anything about Bitcoin, to be honest, 3 years long, and made statements about it and told my friends about it. And it told me also a very valuable lesson, that you should not talk about something that you don't know about. Like, don't form an opinion if you don't know about it. Like, research and then form an opinion and then talk about it. And if someone asks you about something that you have no clue about, tell them that you have no clue about that topic and you have to research about that. It's like we are so afraid to say, oh, sorry, I don't know about that. So that's always my thing. Like, really research or don't talk about that.
Yeah, don't trust, verify. Do your own research, proof of work, right? When you explained your story, I was like, oh, because you explained like first I got into Tesla, first I got into this. I was like, well, where's Bitcoin? When's gonna come? You know, you went like from one to the other. So I was like, is Bitcoin gonna come now, or is it gonna say, oh no, I had this other thing before Bitcoin? That's amazing, mate. I mean, but then podcast wise, when did you start your podcasts? Because because before we go into the today's episode topic, when did you make the decision to be a podcaster and educate people about Bitcoin and invite guests like Micah Saylor or Jeff Booth, as you said before we opened the show? How did it come to that, essentially?
I think I never really made the decision to have a podcast. This decision, well, more like made for me in some weird sense. In 2020, I always had that dream of having my own show. Like, I always watched, since I was very small, one show, and I watched it a lot. It was always a different show. Like, it was in my stock days, it was financial education. Jeremy, I loved him. I watched him every day. He produced Monday to Friday videos, and I loved it. Like, I watched him grow from 2,000 to like 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I always had that idea in mind that I want to have my own show and talk about it. And also, like, even on the internet, on the traditional TV, I had always this late night shows. There was some Austrian ones, there was some German ones that I watched, and it was really always something that I looked up to, like someone that is like, oh, he can invite guests, he can talk about his topics. It was always something, oh, I never had the dream of being a footballer or being some other superstar or something like that. I always wanted to have just my own show, like that for some reason was really intriguing for me. So in 2020, also when I started coming into Bitcoin, I was still in stocks. I still didn't believe that much in Bitcoin. So what did I start? Started my own YouTube channel and talked about stocks. Why did I invest in that stock? Why did I not invest in that stock? And talked about PE ratios and talked about all those things. And those things were on my channel. I deleted them, not because I'm ashamed of them, but because they were in German. And now everything is in English. So I deleted everything that was back then in German. If you go to my TikTok, you actually still find the German videos and short clips of that and stuff like that, if you really want to dive deep in my history. But there's not a real value. And obviously you have to know German to understand those. And from there, I dabbled with YouTube. I was very, very successful and gained in 1 year 200 subscribers, an absolute success story for me. But then Instagram I did, TikTok I did, all the things I did. I was not really successful with anything. Like 200 subscribers on YouTube is great, but it did not. It was not nothing that I really could rely on as an income or could build a bigger future on there. And then I left it in, I don't know, in 2021 to 2022. I kind of had like a 1 year break where I only consumed and nothing produced. And then in end of 2022, beginning of 2023, where I really came more and more into Bitcoin, I just started my Twitter. And first I was just tweeting a little bit here and there and gained like 200 followers. And then starting December 2022, I said like, okay, either you are doing really good in tweets or you're doing no tweets at all. Like, make a decision, Robin. Either you do it full time and go really full retard in making Bitcoin shit memes 24/7, or you don't do anything. Like, there's no 0.5. There's either 0 or 1. And I did that and grew my following from 2023, starting like with 200 followers to now 1.5 years later, 15,000 or something like that. And in the first year, it was like 10,000 followers or 8,000 or something like that. So I grew that, and I saw that a lot of people know me when I tell them my name, but they don't recognize my face. And I was like, if I really want to go deep into Bitcoin community, people have to recognize my face. People have to know more than just my name. Interestingly enough, I was searching half a year for a video thing that I can do. I did like weekly news. You can see that even on my YouTube channel and on my Twitter channel still. I did short videos, I did long videos, I did topics videos, I did news videos, all the things. And I was like, nothing really sticked. I was like, it doesn't feel good. And then I came on the random video saying to me like, oh, you have to produce long videos. Like, long videos are the game now. And I was like, okay, let's try. Like, I was just like, okay, let's sit down for 1 hour and speak about Bitcoin. And then I was discovering something. I'm not interesting. Like, I was recording 1 hour of Bitcoin conversations just with myself, and then I watched the video and I'm like, oh, I'm not interesting at all. Like, I have nothing interesting to say. I think that changed a little bit as I have so much more knowledge now with all the guests. But back then I was like, oh, it's nothing interesting is coming out of my mouth. So then I was like, okay, not. Then actually the same day, and my girlfriend is kind of the idea giver for that. Like, she's like, oh, why don't you invite those people that you anyways talk to on Twitter to do a podcast? And I was like, interesting. I never had the podcast idea. There are so many Bitcoin podcasts, but it kind of my brain never thought about that. And that's why I just started with one podcast a day. And it grew from there to two podcasts. I know, one podcast per week. And then it grew from like 2 podcasts a week, 3 podcasts a week, 5 podcasts. Now I do it daily. Now I have like 230 episodes recorded and published, something like that. And from random blabs that you never heard of because the first time ever went on my channel, to people like Michael Saylor, Jeff Booth, Natalie Brunel. So like I really try to cover everything and cover every aspect of Bitcoin. And I committed myself now, like now I made actually a decision to do it 10 years every day. The next 10 years will be every day a podcast coming out from me documenting someone in Bitcoin, and therefore also documenting the next 10 years of adoption in Bitcoin, because I think the next 10 years will be super duper interesting. And this is kind of the gateway also to the next topic. But yeah, sorry for my extremely long answers.
No worries. It's gonna be interesting. Since we talked about the past, let's also focus on the future. I mean, we don't know what happens in 10 years. There could be a potential next war, because I'm being straightforward now. I mean, look around the world. The world is in flames. I mean, how should I say? We throw out money out of the window for more weapons, more war, and we don't help us, the people, right? And I think Bitcoin, especially in that sense, is for us, the people. It helps us, and it was created to help us and to get rid of this, you could argue, corrupt system that we have. And although we still live in a fiat standard, let's focus on the future to change that, right? Because as you as we talked before we opened the show, I think it's always better to focus on the future rather than past, because you can go to the future but not to the past. If I'm being scientific here, because I love science, right? It's kind of my hobby, and I always thought about, what if in the future I have children and I suddenly die, I have a heart attack, my plane crashes on the way to New York or something, or or oh gosh, that's a horrible example, to New York. Jesus. Fuck. Different country, please. Let's say my plane crashes on the way to Spain or to India or somewhere else, but not New York. And I have family, and they're like, well, what should we do now? Where's our money, right? Luckily, I have Bitcoin. Luckily, I have my Bitcoin stored on a hardware wallet or on a, let's say, an exchange, although I'm not a big fan of it, but let's take that as an example. And I then have like a, let's say, a tiny note saying, hey, if everything happens to me, go to that place or go to this place that you find my passwords, right? But how do you deal with that, or how do you try to convince people of doing that? Because for me, it's always a huge thing. Oh, what will I do in the worst case scenarios if something happens to me, my family members, or right? Because people never think like, oh, nothing's gonna happen, right? But how are you sure? Because we don't know what's gonna happen in 10 years, right? So sorry for making the question too long, but how do you deal with that?
I also sometimes do that on my podcast, making questions very long. It's like when I rewatch the podcast, I see like that, oh, the guests already wanted to answer, and then I still talk 1 minute. It's like I'm very guilty of that. So no worries about that. That's really interesting because with Bitcoin, we all of the sudden are self-responsible with everything. We don't rely on a third party. If you have your money in a bank account, it's pretty easy. You just go to a higher authority. That higher authority, you can show a death certificate. Sorry, and then they will basically give you the money. Like you have to prove that he's dead, and then you have to prove that the money now belongs to you, which is possible, and which is like the legal frames are there for that. For Bitcoin, if you have your Bitcoin only by yourself, like you can make the decision to like, oh, I only want my Bitcoin to be myself. If I die, my Bitcoin die with me. That's something people might want to do or might not want to do. What I want people to consider, if you want to do that, consider also that you might not die, but you might get brain damage. So you might want to have the money accessed by someone else if something medical happens to you, so you don't remember anything. Like you can lose your memory without being dead. So like consider all cases. If you are the only one that can find your Bitcoin, might not be a good idea for that scenario. But if that's a risk you're willing to take, fair enough. Like it's all about what risk are you willing to take? Because if you let someone in on where your Bitcoin are, obviously that person might have access to your Bitcoin. He or she can maybe also steal it. Like there are a lot of interesting ways you can do that. You can either do a lot of multi-signatures where you can have collaborative custody solutions also with some third party, which is a really elegant solution, where you maybe control 2-3 keys. Then there's like someone else that controls a key, someone else that has a key. You can even go ahead and do it in a safe deposit bank and do it like that. There are a lot of different variations you can do multi-signature these days. 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5, even more than that. I don't know if someone needs more than 3 out of 5. There's even multi-institutional key signature, which is an interesting topic I discussed with OnRamped recently. Then you can also time lock your Bitcoin. Like you can say like, oh, I want a key that is activated after 10 years. So if I die and my Bitcoin don't move for 10 years, then your key is activated, which is a very interesting solution and very interesting solution for that problem. So there are a lot of interesting ways, but it all comes down to your personal situation. Like you have to figure out, okay, who do I trust in my environment?
Mm.
Who do I want my Bitcoin to have? Like, who do I trust so much that I trust them with my keys, or so much that I want to give them my Bitcoin when I die, or to handle my Bitcoin if my brain is damaged? There are a lot of big questions before you even get to the technical ones that you have to ask yourself. Depending on how old you are, how much wealth you have, that might be more interesting or not interesting. If you are now 15 years old with 0.00001 Bitcoin, might not be that interesting of a question. If you are 45 years old, have 3 kids, and you have 15 Bitcoin, you should care about that question a lot. Like you should really investigate, who do I trust? Who should take care of my Bitcoin? If something happens to me, brain damage wise, or I die, who takes then care of my kids? Or even like, there's a very, you can go very deep in that topic, even with, for example, if you're family, you're most likely on the same plane. If you go on holiday, um, what if you don't want to be, don't want to lose your Bitcoin, and you go on a plane, and maybe you and your wife die, but your kids are still at home, and you want the Bitcoin to have for the kids? The kids probably don't know how to access your keys. How does that work? So there are so many interesting questions, and you have to just figure out, okay, how secure do I want it? How much Bitcoin do I have it? How much money do I want to invest? Do I want to have another custody solution where someone has a collaborative custody? Do I want to do it completely myself, like just do it everything from scratch myself with other people? Do I want to hire an advisor? There are so many advisors that help you with that stuff. Do I want to keep it at a bank maybe? So I'm shying away from giving an exact answer, because everyone's situation is very different, and there are 1,000 solutions. The only thing that I always say, keep your own keys. Like, make sure you have your keys, because
Not your
they
keys,
are.
not your wallet, right?
Exactly, and so that's the important thing. And another point that I quickly want to make: Bitcoin forces us to be self-responsible, and be a sovereign individual to a certain extent, because you all of a sudden can make mistakes. Like, I yesterday, someone showed me, oh hey, I also have Bitcoin, and they have it on that N26 bank app, and I was like, you cannot even take your Bitcoin out. Like, you might get the advantage of Bitcoin going up, but you don't really have Bitcoin. You have a you have a voucher to maybe someday get Bitcoin for that. But good luck getting your Bitcoin out if the banking system collapses. And you have to make sure that you have the real Bitcoin, that you have Bitcoin in self custody, and that you are self reliant and you are a sovereign individual and you're taking the right steps.
Okay, cool. I think what you also said with the kids, I mean, what happens if me and my wife go on holiday and we left the kids along with our our parents, aka their grandparents, right? And we die, we have an accident. It can happen. I mean, it's everyday thing that maybe happens somewhere around the world, right? That kids lose their parents, and then those kids get my Bitcoin or our Bitcoin. Are they well enough focused and educated? Which also brings me to the word education, because Bitcoin is not just a mathematical problem anymore. It's a whole spectrum. We have mathematics, we could say physics, the mental aspect, the physical aspect, right? It's a huge spectrum nowadays. And I think also education is in the middle of that spectrum, because if something happens to me and the kids know how to deal with that, although it might be very sad that they just lost their parents, but they know how to access their Bitcoin, how to access the money, right? But if they don't know that, well, then who's going to do it? Because then those Bitcoins are just somewhere around and we don't know what's going to happen with them. And I think that was also really good what you said with education, or the example that you made with the kids, education. And that brings me to my second question. Education wise, do you think we are far enough for having a global Bitcoin adoption, or are we still early? Because I would say we're like between, I would say like top, middle, early, and we're like in between middle and early, you know? So do you think that we are maybe already on a good way, or are we still too low for that?
There are two sides of that. The first side is from the price appreciation or purchasing power appreciation. We are super duper early because we just captured 0.1% of the global wealth. I think we will capture well above 50% of the global wealth. There can be an argument made for way more than that. But even if we go very conservatively to 20%, it's still a huge run up to that. And then the second side of that is like, how well is Bitcoin known? Bitcoin, the brand, Bitcoin, the name is quite well known. Like Bitcoin is something that people at least have an idea of. Most people have the wrong idea about Bitcoin. Most people associate Bitcoin with something else that it actually is. But if it's it's in their vocabulary, it's in their minds, Bitcoin. So the brand is really, really strong, especially if we consider there's no marketing team. So the brand is really strong. Financially, we are really early. And what do people actually know about Bitcoin? I think there are less than 100,000 people out there that actually understood Bitcoin to a very wide range. And there are maybe 1 million people that kind of understand it. And then there are maybe 100 million or 200 million people that have some exposure to Bitcoin, maybe a little bit more with the ETFs now and with other things. Might be more than that, 200, 300 million. Hard to pinpoint a number. But in ways of understanding Bitcoin and how much wealth we have in Bitcoin, I would even argue that we are not even early, we are super early. Like we are even before early. We are so far away from the middle that it's it's always shocking, because you also have to consider how many people have an actual significant amount of Bitcoin, a significant amount of money in Bitcoin. If you go out there and ask on the streets like 100 people how many Bitcoin, how much wealth they have in Bitcoin, most would say, "What's Bitcoin?" And I don't have Bitcoin, and no, I don't want Bitcoin. That's like the answer most people would get. And then beyond that, the few that have Bitcoin have like, oh, I have like 1,000 euros in Bitcoin, and yeah, I have 50,000 Bitcoin. I have 50,000 euros somewhere else. So even the people that have Bitcoin are not really fully invested in Bitcoin. They just dabble with it. It's a speculative small asset for them. So we are super early in that regard, because how many people actually are there that are 80% plus in Bitcoin, understand what the vision of Bitcoin is, and are willing to orange pill other people around that? It's like a very, very small selective group. I, for example, because I'm a podcaster, I collect people for my podcast that speak about Bitcoin. I have lists on X where Bitcoiner are classified in. Like, I just like how many Bitcoiners are on X that are worth listening to. And only Bitcoin, no crypto, no shitcoinery. And I gathered 400, 500 people in those lists now. And that's not a lot. Like, I expected so much more. But yeah, there are probably way more people in there that don't want to talk about it. Maybe because they don't want to talk about it of security reasons or other reasons. So we are super duper early. We are super early in that regard from an educational standpoint. As you said, people don't know what Bitcoin really is. Ask on the street what Bitcoin's block size is. Nobody knows that. Like even Bitcoiners, like I know some friends of mine who have Bitcoin and they have 50% of their net worth in Bitcoin. They cannot answer that question. Like they have no clue. They know, yeah, number grab technology, super, future of money. More than that, they don't know. Like they buy Bitcoin because I tell them to look into Bitcoin, and they're like, oh, yeah, I trust Robin, and yeah, I put a huge amount of money in Bitcoin, and I'm like, you don't even have a clue about Bitcoin. Like, what if I'm not here and Bitcoin dumps? Like, you will sell it, and you will have the biggest regret of your life. Please educate yourself. So even the people that have a lot of Bitcoin probably don't understand it to a good amount. Like I myself, I started Bitcoin for 3 years, but I got really educated with the first phase on X when I interacted with other people about that. I was like, oh, I have so many things wrong about Bitcoin. And the second phase, when I have all those amazing people on my podcast that are so much more brighter than me and talk about Bitcoin, they like in the last 8 months, I made the biggest jump in Bitcoin knowledge ever. The first 3.5 years that I was in Bitcoin was not even close to that. Like I didn't understand even 0.1% of Bitcoin. And now maybe I'm at 2% knowledge of Bitcoin, which is really interesting to see. Now I understand what I don't understand slowly. And so to your point, we are very early. Nobody understands Bitcoin. Nobody has Bitcoin. The next 10 years will be very, very intense for orange pilling. We think we are later than we are. We are earlier than we think.
Okay, that's a statement. I should make like a thumbnail out of that. I'm probably gonna do it. Okay. It gives you thinking when you think of the future, what might happen to Bitcoin, essentially, what might happen. I mean, under us right now, it wouldn't surprise me if the state will one day try to ban Bitcoin, because they already tried it in the past, or they already tried to forbid people from buying Bitcoin. I mean, in Germany, they a few years ago they took down some Bitcoin ATMs, where you insert cash and then you can buy Bitcoin. And also why? Because cash is not trackable, right? But yeah, it always, when I think of future times and what, especially adoption wise, Bitcoin adoption wise, because I know some places which, for example, go away, you stupid fly, sorry, which accept Bitcoin and Lightning, right? But it's just one out of like, I mean, in London, for example, I know a guy, it's like just one guy out of like 10 million people, or like, let's say 10 million stores here. I'm not sure how many stores there are, but like just this one dude in a city of 10 million people which accepts Bitcoin and Lightning, right? Is that really already a huge adoption? No, it's like a very, very small adoption. And that also brings me to my second question. I always make those long. I'm so sorry. Do you then think that maybe in 50 years' time, let's say 10 to 50 years' time, we will have a huge adoption happening, or because we're still early, like a very slow and small adoption happening?
I think in 50 years, we will experience something that is close to a full Bitcoin standard, probably way sooner than that even. Do the war example before we get into like how the world looks like and how future Bitcoin adoption will look like. I don't think we will have a huge Cold War around Bitcoin. I think we have a major war already going on information wise. Like we have an information cyber warfare, and the soldiers of today's world are not going on the front line and like getting guns and then trying to kill the other side, because everything is digital. Like physical wars are slowly, I think, dying off, which is a good thing. But there's a new form of war. There's cyber warfare, there's information warfare. And information warfare is very tricky, because all of a sudden there's so much information out there that it's hard to get through. And if if the Bitcoin message, if this orange light is not getting through to people, we will not be successful. Like if there's so much distraction and noise around it, and people continue to buy shit coins, people continue to stay in fiat, people continue to buy overpriced real estate and bind themselves 30 years to something just so they can be a slave, then we are not successful. So the new warfare is information warfare. The new war is the new soldiers are content creators. The new soldiers are people that influence people. Like, why did Elon Musk, the richest dude alive right now, buy Twitter? Like, he wants something from that. He cares about freedom of speech. I truly think that. But caring about freedom of speech and buying a social media platform are two different things, because that's a huge burden on his mind, this Twitter thing. Like, that's a annoying big thing in his mind that he has to care about, and he already has SpaceX and Tesla and all the other things. So like, there's a reason why all the rich dudes are now into social media. Cristiano Ronaldo is so big on social media. Did you see the YouTube channel? He's really getting good in it, and really getting everyone of power right now understands you have to have a social media influence. If you're not creating content, someone else creates content for you, and they might not create that content that you like. So we need more soldiers out there. We need more content creators out there. I encourage everyone on my podcast that doesn't already create content to create content. That's why I have all those random blabs on my channel, because they have something valuable to share. And maybe my podcast is his start of a social media career. That would be the most amazing thing that can happen from my podcast. So we need to be first off aware that we are living in war already, and I'm fighting it 24/7 on YouTube, X, Rumble, and everywhere, because we have to get this orange light out there. And then then let's come to the Bitcoin adoption. I know you said, like, usually your podcasts are 30 minutes. We're already at like
It's fine.
40 or something. So I'm giving very long answers. Then we come to the Bitcoin adoption. I truly think that we will win this war. I truly think that we are on the winning side and on the right side. And even if we lose, at least I want to be on the good side. I want to be the one that fights for sound money, individual rights, freedom rights, everything like that, and not for the other side, the communism side, the socialist side, as we had discussed with you on my podcast. So the question that you have to ask yourself, like, what do you want to fight for, and why aren't you already fighting for it? Because it's easy to open something of a Twitter account, open a small channel, do something with content creating, because you will personally benefit and the world will benefit from it. Just a small encouragement for people that might be on the edge of maybe starting a podcast or not. Then we come to the future Bitcoin adoption. What can happen in the future? We kind of went from 0% Bitcoin adoption to 0.1% Bitcoin adoption in the first 15 years. Like, we have now, from the global wealth, captured 0.1% of the wealth. We will not capture everything, because there is utility value in real estate. There is value in other things. So like, Bitcoin cannot capture 100%, but Bitcoin will capture a whole lot more of than 50%. That's for sure, because people say, like, oh yeah, but Bitcoin is money, and money is 50% of everything. But Bitcoin is way more than money. Bitcoin is already driving new social media avenues with Nostra. Like, Bitcoin can be way more than just money. But if we come to the money part, we're at 50%. So from 0.1 to 50, that's like 500x from here. So that's It sounds very crazy. I'm sounding like a very crazy person, but 500x from here is the conservative case for Bitcoin, or the base case for Bitcoin. The conservative case would be like 200x from here because of 20% of global wealth adoption. And the super high bull case, there's one guy, Ratoshi, that was on my podcast. He's said like Bitcoin will capture 99% of global wealth. I think it's a little high, but that's the bull case. The most bullish thing that I ever heard of anyone saying about Bitcoin, which would then be a 990x from here. Probably the truth is somewhere in the middle between 500 and 990x without inflation. Like right now in today's dollars and euro terms. And then the question just comes like, how fast will it come? Like this could very well be thousands of years that still till we get actually there. I think it will be way faster than that. But it can take longer. It depends on how well we are fighting in the war. I said like Bitcoin can lose. I don't think Bitcoin will lose. But Bitcoin might lose in our generation. Bitcoin might lose the next 200 years. At some point, we will have sound money. At some point, humans will be smart enough to understand that we need sound money to come forward. The question is like, will we see the benefits in our lifetimes? And that's why, especially young people like you and me, I am now 25. I have the whole life in front of me. I want to live in a Bitcoin world, and I don't want to be that guy that fought for Bitcoin, but actually it came 300 years later and he never really saw what Bitcoin came to. Like, I want to actually see what Bitcoin can do for our society. I want to come to that 50% of global net worth mark in my lifetime. If it happens when I'm 75, fine. If it happens at 40, way better. I'm hoping for 45, 50 years old when I'm there, like somewhere around those lines. I'm shooting for a Bitcoin standard around 2044 to 2050. That would be the most amazing outcome. How do we get there? There are a lot of questions now coming up, like, we're already 15 years in and almost nobody has Bitcoin, and those who have Bitcoin don't have enough Bitcoin. Yes. We will get there with a lot of different drivers. The first driver will be greed. This is the driver that most people will be brought into. Greed, Namogap technology, however you want to call it, that's the main driver. Bitcoin continues to outperform everything, and people will see that and will acknowledge that. So people will come in there. Then there is the next driver. Bitcoin is a freedom technology. We're seeing how people get censored and getting arrested, getting kicked off platforms, getting their money frozen all around the world. There is no country where you're safe. It happens in Canada. It happens in France. It will also happen in Austria. It will happen everywhere. So you are not safe from that just because you think you're safe from that. So the question is just like, when will it happen and when will you wake up? Will you wake up before it happens, or will you wake up after something happened to you? Most people will wake up after something happened to them. This is the freedom co-op technology, if you call it like that. That will be a big chunk. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people got orange pilled by Justin Trudeau in the Canadian trucker thing. He is probably 100x better in orange pilling than me. He did a real world example of that. So that's the main two drivers of Bitcoin adoption. There's also a small other one with Nostra, with technology, with small gamifying things. When you have, for example, all of the sudden you have people writing Bitcoin books for kids. then the kids have it, the grandma is coming, grandma is reading it, grandma is getting orange pilled by a kid's book. Someone is like, hey, you should be a Nostra and creating content on Nostra. Then they are sending each other sats, and he's like, oh, what are sats actually? Like, I don't know about sats, I don't know about Bitcoin. He gets orange, but like, we will get people in different ways, and it will be very interesting to see the future adoption of Bitcoin. But you better get some Bitcoin. Like it only grows from here on out, and it's really interesting how people underestimate it still if we look a little bit outside of the Bitcoin bubble.
Okay, cool. That was a very, very intensive, what should I say, talk you just had. I mean, because when you
Rant.
listen, a rant, yeah, when you listen to something like that, it sounds crazy, and I agree. Sometimes maybe I even sound crazy. I mean, look at me, I look like a crazy dude probably. I was in the hospital the other, no, but it's just astonishing. I mean, look what happened to Durov in France, which, by the way, was a setup by Emmanuel Macron, the French president of France. Of course. It was a setup. The French always have setups. They always cheat the cheat code, where he basically said, Durov, come to me. I want to discuss Telegram and all that stuff with you. But then he arrested him, like for no reason at all, because allegedly terrorism and money laundering and all that stuff, although we don't know if it's true yet. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it's a huge lie. I mean, you know how the state lies. But that exactly is a perfect example of freedom of speech being taken away. And if you post something about that, or if you say something, guess what? You get censored, right? They delete your account. I'm not sure if they would arrest you even for saying something on the internet, but it could happen. It might happen already in some places around the world. But that essentially, for me as a Bitcoiner, is important freedom of speech. And you can take everything from me, but one thing or two things you can't take away is Bitcoin and freedom of speech. And what you also said with the war, that it's not World War III, it's not people against people. It's a technical war. You could argue, war against our political opinions or our opinions in general. When I look back in history, and I'm making this long now because you made me to it, mate. When I look back in history, we always had those phases, which always were like about 50 to 80 years long. And in certain phases, we had wars. We had exactly what we have now with information wars. People are getting censored. I mean, look at World War I, World War II. And then after that, you could argue peace. We had finally, I always look at that, from that perspective, that there is certain things that maybe need to happen, that we wake up and say, okay, enough is enough. Let's go from that to that and change things, right? As you said, people will probably realize what's happening after they awake, right? After they realize that what they've just voted for or done for was huge and completely useless, right? But yeah, that brings me basically to my last question. And damn, that was probably, it wasn't the longest episode I did with people. I had like even the one that was longer. But would you say that Bitcoin is here to stay? Because remember, you also asked me that in your podcast, right? So would you say that Bitcoin is here to stay?
Yes and no. Like there is a very, very small chance that I see where Bitcoin is not successful, because there might be one small black swan blind spot
Mm-hmm.
that we all don't see. I never want to rule that out. It's almost impossible at this point. But there's nothing that is impossible. What is impossible and what is 100% here to stay is the idea of sound money. That's the more powerful thing that will always stay here. If Bitcoin goes under tomorrow, we will all rally around and figure out sound money a new sound money solution tomorrow. Like I will not stop talking about sound money and unconfiscatable, permissionless money, because I want that. I want that future for myself, for my kids, for my grandkids, for everyone. So even if Bitcoin goes down, the idea of it can never be vanished. And I think that's the powerful message. Yes, of course, there is a 0.0001% chance that Bitcoin might be down tomorrow, might be down in 100 years, might be down in 1,000 years. But this doesn't mean that we were not successful. Bitcoin is planting the idea of sound money in so many people's heads that it is already a success. Like even if it dies tomorrow and goes to zero, or like Peter said, like to minus 1,000. Peter Seyr, not Schiff, but Peter Schiff could also say that. Even if that happens, Bitcoin was still successful because we are planting the idea of sound money. And that's the main thing that we should all rally around. There are people that get sound money that don't get Bitcoin. Peter Schiff. There are many out there that have that. So we should really like. I'm a free market maximalist. I always say that. Even though this now comes to being a Bitcoin maximalist, but in general, I'm a free market maximalist. So that idea will never ever die, and will only go stronger with decentralized media, which we have with social media, and then maybe beyond that, a decentralized social media. So like the decentralized media. That the thing is out of the hat. Like we cannot the rabbit is out of the hat, we cannot bring it back. And Bitcoin, the idea of sound money, will always stay in our minds, even if Bitcoin fails for some reason, and the reason is very, very small. I cannot even think of something.
Wow. That basically brings me to the end of this episode. Robin, before we end this episode, though, would you like to kick my camera like I always do? I always kick the table and then the camera starts shaking. So sorry. Would you like to share your social media with us? You're on Twitter. Are you also on Nostr? Are you also on Instagram? I mean, YouTube. I can link that down below, and Rumble as well. But would you like to share your social media with us?
By the way, I opened a Rumble account also now. So like I'm
Oh,
now on Rumble. I'm currently uploading 3 videos per day on Rumble from my past library. All the best videos from YouTube, I'm also uploading on Rumble. By the way, I have a solution for the camera thing, because I also kick my
yeah.
table a lot. And I have basically a different table for where my monitor and my camera stands than where
Oh,
my keyboard is. So I
that's
literally
clever.
cannot move the camera, because I also do that a lot. But where can people find me? First of all, like if you see that video and you're not subscribed to Yanis, you definitely should do that. Like give him first the follow and the subscribe. He is way more important. And then if you're still looking out for another podcast, go to Robin Seyr wherever you want to consume podcasts. Like, oh yeah, it's written right here, Robin Seyr podcast. Like Robin Seyr on every platform. It's like on Rumble, it's Robin Seyr. On YouTube, it's Robin Seyr. On X, it's Robin Seyr. On TikTok, it's Robin Seyr. On Spotify, it's that. On Apple Music, it's that. So I love consuming my things on YouTube. Maybe if they kick out more Bitcoin channels, but simply Bitcoin was reinstated, which was a very positive news. I think it was one day before the Telegram CEO Pavel Durov, something like that,
Yeah, the rough.
was released from prison for like a $5 million bail or something like that, which was interesting. But yeah, you can find me everywhere with Robin Seyr. But make sure you really are subscribed and invested in Yanis podcast. That's important thing.
Thank you. That's very. If I would be like next to you, right in front of you, I would hug you. But now I can't. I need to do like a virtual hug, So
I feel hugged, Janis. Thank you very much.
okay, thank you. So yeah, people, this was another episode of Nomad Podcast. Robin, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I always like to talk to people. It's always nice, especially when you have people which talk a lot like me, because I'm always a guy. I talk a lot. Maybe it's my character and my roots, but So thank you for joining me, and hopefully see you soon. Bye bye.
Nomad Podcast.